Hi, Misha here, and this is my top 10 most clone-correct rifles. And full acknowledgement to user Brian Hess for suggesting this. Well, rather, he suggested top 5, but yeah, I couldn't narrow it down to 5. So he suggested a top 5 most clone-correct guns in my recent Taiwanese Republic of China T91 video, which is a very clone correct gun, but it won't be in this video because you've recently looked at it. And I will lay out some kind of criteria that I use to select, and this is not one of them. This is my British L1A1. This is one of the few law enforcement imported Title I's, because these were SLRs, always semi-auto. And these were purchased by police officers as standard Title I guns. And this isn't me talking about what I read on the internet. Actually, a friend's brother, who was a deputy sheriff, did just that in the 90s. So he even showed me the gun. I believe him. So that's something, it's just one of those kind of flukes that happened back in the day. Keep in mind, when these were imported in the 90s, it was either right before or right at the beginning of the assault weapons ban, so things like the flash hider, bayonet lug, at that time would have made them verboten anyway. But a few came in, they're grandfathered in, they're cool, they do have wear. It's a legitimate L1A1. And I love the FAL, and of my FALs, this is probably individually my favorite. I considered putting a FAL on the list, but truth be told, all my FALs are pretty straightforward parts kits builds. Usually matching kits, but I would buy a kit, get a receiver, put it together. Took less than an afternoon, and that really doesn't meet the criteria of this video. So that's kind of the first criteria. Can't just be a straightforward parts kit build, otherwise this would be populated with a bunch of guns from Mac Arms and what have you. It also needs to be something that I put time into myself, not something that I bought pre-done and have no personal connection with. And better yet, if I had to kind of search around for months or years for all the parts. And it just has to be something that brings me joy, that I look back on fondly. Again, kind of the longer it took to do, the better. And, you know, a gun that I enjoy shooting and that has historical significance. Things that don't matter as much to me, markings. I mean, in the abstract, of course I want markings as correct as possible, but I'm blind. So, yeah, I'm not going to sit there and worry over fonts and colorations that I can't even see. Plus, I recognize that my guns are semi-autos. There's a certain limit. I mean, it's neat to have correct selector markings on an AK, but they are semi-autos. Sometimes it is good for them to be easily identified as such and not mistaken by machine guns. Keep in mind, I'm an FFL. I wouldn't want any trouble with anyone. So, I'm sure I'll think of a few other criteria as the video goes on. I'm also going to talk about kind of how 2021 ended for the channel and my kind of immediate plans and plans for the next few months. Just kind of chat with you guys. So, half story time, half channel update, and half top 10 correct clones, aka Man Bear Pig. Israeli FAL. Oh, one thing before we get started. If you could, check out the link to our Patreon page, $1 and up. You can ask questions for Q&As. Try to do those a couple of times, 2 to 4 a year. Got one actually probably coming up pretty soon. And then $5 and up and $10 and up have their own tiers. But yeah, just thought I'd put a little plug in. And in the interim, bring out that T91 real quick again. I'm not counting it towards the video because it had its own full video last week. But it's kind of what inspired this one, and it's a pretty darn clone correct gun. So if you missed that video, check her out. And now, on to the top 10 with number 10. And we begin more or less at the beginning, one of my first project guns. This is, of course, my Colt M16A1. Now, the upper was a complete upper. It was one of the National Guard uppers. So I bought it. There you go. Originally, I bought an A2, an Aero Precision, I believe it was, lower. And that was the first lower I assembled using a parts kit, lower parts kit, LPK. At the time, I didn't really see the point of getting a Nodak Spud A1 lower. The differences here and here seemed minor to me. At the time, I could get a Aero Precision for like $50 or a Nodak for $150. And when I built this, I was doing it very much on the cheap. In fact, the whole reason I did the upper was I wanted to see how cheap I could build an AR. For fun, sure. Also because I had no money at all. So, yeah. And I'm actually glad I went with the A2 first because I made some mistakes putting the lower together. You know, a couple of idiot scratches, a couple of springs kind of goofed, front pivot pin. So I learned on it and a couple of others, and then when I was better, I got a legitimate lower. I've had both Nodak and Brownells on this over time, but either way, A1 style, and did it much better and appreciated the differences a lot more. Also, when I got the upper, it had slightly beat up handguards, so when all those A1 kids came in, I put a nicer set on, and originally this had an E1 buttstock, XM16E1. Eventually I put a correct A1 on it, although it could have been an early A1, even with the birdcage. Now it did come in black. That's how the upper was, because it had gone through refurbishment at the National Guard. 601, second try. Held open.
So first impressions for me, recoils a little bit more than the rifles I'm used to shooting, but those are also generally 2 to 3 pounds heavier, because that thing is extremely light. It balances like a carbine.
It's pretty darn clone correct. Standard 70s furniture. It has the original Colt 1 in 12 twist chrome lined barrel with the markings. It does have the teardrop forward assist, and again, much as it had been blackened or given a blackened anodizing, it actually came with an A2 style port door. Probably the original got bent in service and it was replaced. Could I replace it? Sure, easy enough. I just kind of leave it as is. It's part of the gun's history and it just shows that it went through the wars. This is a good shooter, and again, it was really my first major project gun and where I learned about cloning and especially retro cloning. And it does shoot really well. And it has quite a bit of personal significance to me. Very light, very handy. Another key part of any good clone is having the right sling. So I usually try to put the right slings on these. This has the later seatbelt style. And a third component would be the correct magazine. I didn't want to drag out magazines for this video. So, you know, just imagine a 70s 20 rounder in here for fun. But yeah, this was my first. But you know how surplus parts are. They're not always easy to get, and prices go up, down, and sideways. Luckily, when these uppers were available, they were only like $240, $250 for the upper. And again, if you didn't mind an A2 lower, it was a good learning experience, and it kind of felt like it was mine, even though we all know an AR is pretty easy to do with just garage tools. But it was the first, and it seemed like a good place to start. So let's move on. My Romanian Kuger SAR2 in PA86 configuration. Now, normally for this video, I wouldn't say pre-made guns, unless they've had several altercations, updates, upgrades, and this one certainly has. You know the story. I bought it 20 years ago. It was still the assault weapons ban. I definitely didn't buy this stock during the ban. And over time, went with wood, went with black polymer, went with wood and this stock that I definitely didn't put on in a foregrip. Even after the ban sunset, I had one of those kind of collars pinned on for 14 mil threads. But it was really hard to get the parts, the PA86 parts. I was able to get the upswept cocking handle here. So it took a lot of time, but I wasn't really busting hump, but looking around and everything. And so it really wasn't until Arms of America imported all those kits that I was able to finally finish it up. FM RPK 74. Now, I did have a local gunsmith swap the front sight bases. I don't have the ability to really do that myself, nor trust in myself. So he did that. That gave me the correct 22 millimeter threads, gave me the bayonet lug. I did have, probably still have one around here somewhere, the gas block with the accessory lug. But I thought, this block is lined up properly. It doesn't have a lot of corrosion and wear in it like a military block might. I don't really need the accessory lug. Let's just leave it alone. So I kind of drew the line there. I did put on the correct Bakelite upper handguard. Initially, for years, I had a Bulgarian on. The Bulgarians and the Romanians are very close. But eventually, I took one of the nicer ones out of one of the kits and put it on here. Same with the Dong handguard. It's got the correct inverted checker grip. Of course, it's got the button folder, not the lever, which is correct for a Romanian military. And it's got the same green sling the SAR-2 shipped with, because it would be correct for military. And of course, when I bought this during the ban, it came with one 30-round Bakelite pre-ban mag and one short, 5 or 10 round steel. But in Romania, they only use steel mags. But of course, with the ban lifting and everything else, I picked up a pouch set of 30-round steel mags for this guy. Really fun gun. Love shooting it. And, if it took me the better part of 20 years to finish it up, it was definitely worth the wait. And when I did it, it was a pretty unique gun. There weren't a lot of PA86s out there. But yeah, I thought since we looked at an AR, gotta look at an AK. Plus, I've had the core gun here for so darn long. But let's change gears yet again. Number 8, Italian Pietro Beretta BM59E. I'm breaking a little bit of a rule here because this is a factory-produced gun. It was assembled by James River Armory a few years ago, but it was done exactly how I would have wanted, and I have worked with it a bit and changed a few things. I just wanted to have a BM59 on the list here, and my other one is a Springfield pre-ban, so didn't really seem fitting. This has the original barrel, and just like how Beretta assembled a lot of these BM59Es using World War II era M1 Grand receivers modified to take detaching mags, that's what James River did as well. And so I thought that was kind of neat that it is pretty darn close to military. It's got the rubber butt plate with the trapdoor, military sling, the big old muzzle brake, bayonet lug, and of course again it feeds from standard Italian mags. BM59, last mag of the day. Of course, the one you just saw shooting is slightly different. It's one of my Italian guns, but I just thought featuring this one would be a little more honest, since it is a clone in a way, or at least an interesting kit build using an original receiver, with the only real difference being that these are not select fire. Now, not all BM59s were select fire. They had the BM59 SL, which was still a semi-auto, but apparently these kits were select fire, or at least select fire possible, so the ATF said the receivers couldn't make it. Luckily, the kits came in before barrels had to be cut up. Just a neat gun. I love the BM59 ever since picking one up at a gun show as a kid in the 80s. So I said we'd talk about a story time a wee bit. Throughout last year, tried to deliver as many videos as we could. Tried to have unique guns when possible, although, gonna be honest with you, a little hard to do. There weren't a whole lot of new guns, and those that did come out were often really expensive and hard to get. But I hope 2021's production wasn't dull. I hope that people were entertained and maybe a little bit informed. And if you notice, I really didn't take any breaks. I more or less posted 2 to 4 videos every week starting in the spring of 2021, and happy to do it. It was good for me. I like working, and it was good considering events in my life at the time to keep busy, and everyone's support and feedback was much obliged. So if you haven't checked out some of the other videos, I know people said in recent months that they didn't always get notifications, so you might check the back catalog, because I did put out quite a few videos last year, and continuing that trend as we get into 2022. Number 7, let's do another AR. And I almost didn't include this one because it is a factory gun, but I have made so many alterations, and the last ones actually were made last year, so it seemed an appropriate time to talk about it. My Colt AR-15A4 into Colt M16A4 configuration. And this kind of shows you where markings. I'm fine with the Colt lower. I like knowing that it's a Colt lower with the correct safety and whatnot, correct buttstock. If I really wanted to go whole hog, I could do it 80% lower, marked M16A4 and all that good stuff, even with the proper selector marks. But I'm happy enough with this. Started off as a Bog AR-15A4. Plastic handguards, removable carry handle. I bought one of the Blim Knights Armament handguards a few years back. First I had a Chinese knockoff ACOG on it, and then last year, maybe it was late the year before, I got a good deal on a used real ACOG that's almost the correct military one. And a Motac sight. I found these real cheap at one point. Of course, the foregrip came with the handguard, the Harris bipod. What I really added last year was this laser system, which is an original that a friend gifted me. It really completed the look. It was actually getting this, the real one, because I had a fake, that prompted me to go ahead and update to the correct ACOG, because it just seemed weird to have everything correct. And this is, the M16A4, there are several configurations, and they were often customized in the field, and this is probably not 100% correct. But I feel like it's pretty there. And it's a lot of fun to shoot. Yeah, 15A4. Of course, with all this stuff on it especially, it's also rather heavy. Not all that long, just under 40 inches, but quite heavy. This sling and mag carrier are original. I actually picked them up at a local surplus store about 10 years ago. Just have a generic Colt mag in here. But I'm very pleased with it. The funny thing about this, with the M16A1, I started off to make a clone correct with this. I just wanted an M16A4, and it kind of grew organically into what you see here. Now, why are the two ARs we've looked at so far both rifles, not carbines? That's because there are so many carbine options. You can essentially buy what you need. For example, the Colt 6920 SOCOM or the FN M4 collectors. And those aren't really project guns, that they come 80-90% there. But with rifles, your options are a lot more limited. And so that's kind of why I ended up doing that. And just to let you know, when I did my A1 back then, that was long before Colt did their reissues, or Brownells even had its whole product line. Long before. But no, great gun, good shooter. And again, it took me well over 5 years to do this, but even though when you add up all the costs at once, they can get a little spendy. Yeah, if you spread them out over half a decade, a lot more stomachable. So despite what people might think, yeah, I really do like ARs. Not just an AK person. No, at least not all the time. But I know you guys are here mostly for AK stuff, and one of the AKs you've seen me update the most over the past decade, my Polish FB Radom Archer. This has had several iterations, and it seems quite complete now. I should one day go ahead and machine out this bayonet lug. One day. Has the correct handguard, of course, foregrip. All the controls are right. I got rid of the doofy cutout safety here, going to just a standard one. Of course, have the right grip on, and the collapsing stock that doesn't want to, there we go, for the 4 position, which some people don't like the looks of, but trust me, I'm not a big fan of AR looking stocks on AKs, but this one's actually very comfortable. Nice rubber boot, good footprint. It's a good stock, it really is. And we got of course, the POPC Generation 4 rail with an EOTech 552 on it, which is, at least for a time, what the Polish military mostly used. These days I think they might have progressed on. Also, recently, at least last year, added the correct automatic latch. Before that, just had a standard dust cover latch. So it's pretty well where it needs to be. Archer. I'm not sure this gun's ever had a misfire or a malfunction. If it has, it's really slipping my mind right now. I don't think so. And it'll eat anything from Tula rubbish to, of course, high quality stuff. By the way, this sling was donated by a supporter a year or two ago. It's not as heavy as it looks. It's not like the T91 sling where it's big and heavy, but it is big. And of course, last year there was a lot of talk about Barreels and FB Radom, because we first got the Mini Barreel, then the Barreel 7.62, then the Barreel 5.56. And all honesty, those are probably better guns. But the reason I kept the Archer, well, for one thing, I already had it, so why not? It worked, it's fine. I'd already kind of ironed out all the kinks that IO may or may not have given it. For another, it was that it came with the left side selector. And of course, you can install this on the current imports, but it wouldn't have the receiver markings. Now, not having the markings, not having the selector, that wouldn't bug me. Again, I don't get too hung up on them. But when it would cost me more money to switch to the newer import, and I'd lose this, it just didn't seem worth it. Even though I think the current imports from AOA, Atlantic, are probably higher quality, they definitely do a better job of machining out the magwell. And I'm sure you know, but these take the same clip-on M16 style bipod that the Tantal does. And if I had the bayonet lug machined out, it would use the same type of thing. And this device is not only a muzzle brake, it also acts as a grenade launcher. That's why there's a spring on it. Oh, you know, we've waxed on for years about these. But it's been a lot of fun to to do. And like I said, a supporter gave me this sling, and I say it a lot, but support from Patreon and YouTube and elsewhere, even just patronizing Ozark Bear Arms, the business, all of that really has helped and is significantly appreciated. Every one of you, sincerely, thank you for your continuing the support over the years. It lets me have cool guns like this, and then I get to share them with you. So, hope that seems like a good deal. Thank you. At number 5, we have my IWI X95 Tavor. And I've set this up relatively close to a modern X95 II. And as you know, the original micro Tavor and X95 had a 13-inch barrel. Well, the more recent ones have a 15-inch barrel with select fire, and some of them designated more as a DMR, even have a 16. I didn't want to do the SBR thing with this. I don't know, maybe one day I will. But what I did was permanently attach the flash hider onto the 16-inch barrel. Barrel's long enough, but if you want the original thin polymer butt plate, you need a little more length, so permanently affixing the device will do it. Then actually one of the first things I did was change out to the more traditional style pistol grip with IDF grips, and I thought this would be too fat. Usually I don't like fat grips, but the way these work, the way they fit in my hand, I actually really do like it. And it definitely gives it a different look from the traditional Tavor. And then of course I replaced the long forearm with the short forearm and the short top rail. Still has a flip up sights though. This is a really fun gun. It's probably not my favorite bullpup. That would still be the AUG, the AUG, the Steyr. But I've had a couple of Steyr videos recently, so I decided I haven't talked about the good old Tavor X95 recently, so let's give it. Plus I did spend a decent amount of time getting the parts and changing it up, and actually the original butt plate, when I ordered it, got lost in the mail, had to get another one, then the first one showed up, and then I told IWI, and they just said basically keep it, so I gave it to a friend. Why not? This is a good shooter. It's as reliable as really most any bullpup, and unlike a lot of bullpups, it actually has a pretty decent trigger. It's not bad at all, straight from the factory. I know some people still replace them, but fine by me. I've got a standard IDF sling on here. Had to use some cord to tie it to the guard. And I could have done flashlight and lasers and all that gobbledygook, but I just put a simple foregrip on it. It's not the lightest gun, but it's not super heavy, and it's very trim. And I really like how it handles. If you haven't picked up a X95 with the shortened forearm and shortened top rail, it really does. It's not a lot lighter, but because you're taking a couple inches of weight off the front, it maneuvers and moves a lot faster. It does change, along with getting rid of that big thick rubber sex toy butt plate. Yeah, and it has the standard Meprolite 21 sight on it, QD style. I know they do the quote-unquote IDF editions, but those were long after I did this. This is a pretty early run gun. It serves me just fine, and again has been very reliable over the years, and I've enjoyed changing it up. You know, one thing we're probably going to get ready to do, I'm already getting construction material together, is set up a new shooting spot, kind of make a new little hut, and put some new steel out there. Unfortunately, the weather hasn't been the greatest recently, and with the holidays, instead of trying to push it ahead and fit it in somehow, somewhere, I just decided, let's get to it after the new year, and now it's turned off cold. But very soon we're going to start kind of pacing it off, flagging it off, figuring out exactly what we need. And luckily a good friend is a contractor and offered to help, with the understanding he can also shoot out there. So I don't know how long that'll take to complete. It probably not something that's going to happen overnight, but ultimately we'll have a new shooting area, and that's something I'm looking forward to, and hope you guys do enjoy it too. It'll be good to get outdoors and work with my hands. Sometimes I really do need to get out of the office, get away from computers. You know what I mean? With that, shall we move on? Well, let's move away from modern and compact 223 to number 4, rather old and big and heavy. This is my M14 E2 clone, or M14A1, and this is what I would consider a true clone project. And I did a kind of a tribute video to Fred's M14 stocks a couple of years ago on it, and I did get a good number of the parts from him, but not all, far from all. And I did piece this together over time. I first kind of saw and learned about the E2 when a friend had the stock eons ago, but I didn't have any of the hardware, and we're talking, this was probably 30 years ago. And I thought it was neat to have a pistol grip on an M14. Between the pistol grip and the more straight comb stock, it really does change how this gun feels and shoots. Of course, it still has the standard barrel. This is a compensator. This is one of the few not original parts. This is actually from Fulton, but the stabilizer does fine. The bipod, originally I had a reproduction, but this is actually an original. Picked that up a couple of years ago. Same with the ventilated upper handguard. They typically use these because these don't have quick change barrels. Gave it a little breathing. The buttstock is original, but old stock, it was never fitted. The foregrip here and rubber butt plate. Well, I should say the flip up metal butt plate is from Fred's. The rubber is actually a very nicely done reproduction, only because the original rubber was so hard and starting to crumble. You know how rubber gets. But it does have the original kind of 3-hook sling on it. And this is actually built using a demilled and redone original HRA receiver. Of course, it takes standard mags. It's pretty dang clone correct. M14. Even have a faux fire mode selector here. Definitely faux. It's attached to the stock, not the receiver. It doesn't connect to anything. I can push it in. Come on, quit finding me. There we go. Not one I take out shooting a whole lot. It was a fun project to do, and it is fun to shoot, but it's big, heavy, and I don't know, there's usually other stuff, plus, you know, the cost of 7.62 and 8.0, 308 these days. But I'm really happy I did it, and yeah, really it didn't cost a heck of a lot. There was a minute in time when these stocks were on the market for just a couple $100, and you know, it took him a couple months to get me the parts, but Fred's didn't charge me much at all for the foregrip, butt, sling. The Fulton part, I think, was $50-$80. And this, I really have no money in because it came on another gun, and I snagged it before selling that other gun. Glad to have it. As you know, M14s are not the love of my life, but I respect them. I love the wood and steel look of them. But when it comes to 7.62, 308 guns, much more of a BM59, FAL, G3 fan. But since the M14A1 saw quite a bit of use in Vietnam, at least compared to the standard rifle, and use longer, I do find its history as a light machine gun quite fascinating, and I love me some light machine guns. In fact, I did this project right around the time we moved here, so that would have been nearly 7 years ago. In fact, we did a real old video with it way back when. Pretty much every gun of mine that's safe to shoot, we've at least test fired. May not be something shoot every day. Heck, don't have the time or the money to do that. But I do try to make sure every one of my guns is up and running regardless. But of course, with the ammo costs last year and only marginally better this year, I had to be kind of a little bit careful. But still try to get out and have some fun. So let's move into our top 3. Number 3, my Czech CZ 805A1. This is a clone of the still current Czech military's rifle. Their A1 rifle has a 14-inch barrel. The A2 carbine has 11. This is built from my CZ 805 S1. These are often called Bren 1s, but they're not, just Bren. And my road to liking these and then loving these was not exactly a short one. When they first came out, I didn't really see the point. They seemed a little big, little kind of blocky, little kind of heavy, and a lot kind of expensive. Prices came down, and then the pistols were also complemented by the rifles. And just time. As I've said before, the first one I bought was mostly out of boredom, figuring we would do a video with it, and then I would flip it. And now here we are. So this started off as a carbine, so it came with the right side folding stock, which is also adjustable length, pretty standard. It also has a removable riser. It's just not on right now. One thing I didn't do, I never installed the side rail panels. I've had offers to buy them. I just don't need them. I know for a true clone correct I should have them, but I actually like the look and feel. So my gun. And usually I have a foregrip here, but it's off right now. And then just a hand stop. Has the standard flip up iron sights on it. These are Czech. Has just a typical kind of cheap primary arms optic. The big difference, the barrel. I was able to pick up an original 14-inch barrel with bayonet lug, and then I put an extension on with the flash hider pinned on, because if you just screw the hider on, you're still only at about 15 inches, so you need about an inch. So this is at 16.1. A little doofy, but I really didn't want to SBR it. I can always do it later. It works. I like it. And having this shorter barrel, you wouldn't think 2 inches from 16 to 14 would matter, but it does save weight. Also, this barrel is a little bit thinner than on the US carbine, and it's threaded 14 by 1, not half by 28, is on the US carbine barrel. So, little things like that do matter. And of course, we've shot various 805s many times over the years. Bren 2. Now yes, I still own a CZ Bren 2, but it's not really a project gun. It has the barrel it came with, pretty much stock. This one, since I did change the whole forewind, I do kind of consider it a light project. I really enjoy shooting it. This bolt travel is super smooth. The trigger is still better than on the 2. And the 2 is perfectly nice. And another silly thing that us clone people do, I took the perfectly good Stanag magwell out and put in the completely impractical Czech military magwell that takes proprietary mags and G36 mags. yeah, there's no practical reason to do that. But it was really cool that CZ sold these wells, and luckily they sold them with 5 magazines, which is enough. 1 for the gun, 4 for a pouch. And they weren't crazy money. They're about $150 shipped for the mag well and 5 magazines together. So $30 per mag plus a free well, whatever you'd like to do. But I'd say that definitely puts it into clone territory, because while Czech Special Forces would sometimes use the NATO mag well for compatibility with their fellows, the military still uses these kind of AK or G36, if you will, style mags. So I think between that and shortening the barrel, they're not huge differences, but that's kind of what clone people are after. And even though I really like the Brenda 2, not getting rid of this, and a lot of people I know that have the original 805, they're not getting rid of them either. The Brenda 2 is just a different critter. This one has a certain kind of weird cool to it, and has been a lot of fun over the years. I'm not really ranking these in terms of absolute favorite guns, but more like how fun the project was, how unique it was. If I really wanted to, I could have this Cerakoted a slightly different color to be more like the Czech military, I know. There's still a few things I could do, but I'm just kind of ranking them overall, and kind of just basically how I feel, if that makes sense. Kind of what it's all about, right? But this one had to be on the list, and she hasn't been out in a video in a few months, so give it a little air, right? So, who's number 2? Who's runner-up? Well, I already mentioned it, and it's kind of a cousin to the 805. Number 2, we have the German Heckler & Koch G36, G36E, if you're talking the export variant. And had a lot of fun with this gun. And even last year I was still making changes and whatnot. As modular as an AR-15 is, frankly, the G36, like a lot of HKs, is just as modular and easy to upgrade, change, alter, have fun with. From the barrel length, you can, with the right tools, easily change out, to the modular forearm, to the quick removable bipod, which is at the moment off mine, to the different stock types and lengths, to being able to have different trigger groups in with just the push of a pin, even different mag wells, and of course different optics dovetailed on the top. Before I was rocking the 1.5, but then thanks to HK Parts I got just too good of a deal on a dual optic, and now it's in kind of traditional Bundeswehr configuration. And of course, as I mentioned in a video a year ago, I originally had the shorter C stock on it, which for my height probably is still a little better, but I wanted to have the full length Bundeswehr stock, so I got that from them. And this gun, of course, is about as correct as you can have one of these and still have it legal. And she runs like a champ too. G36E. Just in terms of fun shooting, this is at the top, and has been out several times shooting over the years. I really didn't think much about getting a G36, of course, until the SL8s came in, and that at first sounded great. Oh yeah, it's a German. But then we saw, of course, how converted they were, and how much work and skill it took to even put them like anything military. Of course, Tom Bostic, Tommy built, did just that, but then they were multi-$1,000 guns. Still, it whetted the palate. Now, of course, there have been those copies that Bostic has done, and we did trial those out too. And while a good gun, much like any, I don't want to say clone, but any derivative, it's still not the real thing. So your options were either converted SL8 or one of the Tommy built guns, until a small run of these were done by Mike Ott, MM, using demilled original HK receivers that were professionally and ATF approved, put back together with original HK barrels. So basically, taking a gun from Europe, cutting the receiver up, bringing the parts over, putting the receiver back together here. It's as good as it's going to get. And even though the only work I've really done on it is swapping the stock and this and the handguard a couple of times and what have you, it's such a unique gun and exactly what clones should be. This is a clone. So yeah, it definitely ranks number 2. It has a certain cool factor, fun to shoot, military history, very reliable, still in service today, even though talks of its replacement have been ongoing for a few years. And kind of always reminded me of a gun from Aliens. So, as I said earlier in the video, I've been putting out videos for 9 months straight, and I need to take a rest. Now, usually when I do that is when I get most active, most ideas. But typically I have a backlog of 3, 4, 5, even more videos. I've pretty much used up all my backlog. And so I need time to build that back up, come up with ideas. By the way, again, thanks to Brian Hess for the idea of this video. And go to the range. Lately, around here, late December, January, the flu and cold, and yes, even the Rona have been floating around. And so it seems like every time I call someone, they're either getting sick, or getting over being sick. I don't care if it is just the common cold. I don't want it. I don't like being sick. Sucks to be sick. So that and the fact that it's been highs in the 20s or 30s, maybe 40s, good time to stay in. Plus, as I'm recording this, SHOT Show is starting, so hopefully there'll be some new stuff to talk about from SHOT Show. Just need a couple of weeks to build things back up, come up with some new interest, and what have you. So definitely please do check out the back catalog, and there will be one video I'm sure we'll do during the vacation break here. I'll talk about that next. But first, who is first? Who is the best clone in my collection? At number 1, as the best AK Type 3 clone, down to the smallest detail, the Polish WBP Mini Jack pistol. I mean, it's just absolutely perfect, right? From the correct barrel length, correct gas system, correct lightning cuts, correct end. Perfect, right? Is a authentic 1950s Type 3. Mini Jack, last mag of the, well, almost night now. And it shoots.
And then some.
Alright, for anyone who knows my top videos, you know I've always got to throw in a ringer right at the end. Now this really is a good gun. It's reliable, it's well made. These are actual machined receivers according to WBP. These are cold hammer forged barrels. But when we put out this video a couple of months ago, everyone had to point out the lightning cuts and the way the end angles and the caps. Yes, everyone knows this is not meant to be a Type 3. This is meant to be their current Mini Jack pistol, 10-inch barrel, combo, short gas system, on a machined receiver, because that's what Americans like. Not very heavy either, about 6 pounds. Very light for a mill gun, plus it has the extended mag catch. And I'm going to get that, aren't I? Extended safety. And it is threaded for standard AR-15 tubes, thus braces. Nah, it's a good gun, but this is a modern gun. I don't think anyone at WBP thought it was a Type 3. No. Alright. The real number 1. Probably the best clone rifle I own, my Soviet Russian 70 AKM. And I did have a good bit to do with this being built, even if my hands didn't physically do it. Now, these were put together by Legion USA, but as a special contract, special run for Ozark Bear Arms, my store. I supplied the barrels, I picked the kits, and I selected the receivers. There's only like one or two things on here that I could and still can do better, and this is the one I picked for myself. I thought the later kits were kind of interesting, so I had these built using later ones, because you have things like the cast gas block and the more angular cut handguard and the side mounted sling swivel on the stock. Early AKMs are cool, but they're easier to find. You know, the SAR-1, even the Wasser 10, the Egyptian Mahdi do a very good job of looking like an early AKM, at least, 60s, early 70s. But for late Russian style, there's not a lot of options, especially for all the features. And these were a really fun project, one of the first custom runs I had from the store. So, what do we have here? The kits were actually refurbished original guns done by Molot in Russia. So they brought in service guns. If things needed to be replaced, they did replace them. But overall, very nice. Now, of course, you can't import these as guns, so the receivers and barrels had to be cut up. But they did come over as kits with nice furniture, matching parts, including trunnion, bolt carrier, bolt, top cover, and gas tube. Oftentimes even the rear sight, and sometimes even the recoil spring would match, although on later guns like this, they didn't usually put numbers on those at all. So matching numbers. Even some of the parts had the original kind of black enamel finish, like say on the safety. Original hardwood furniture. So we have kits. Now, the thing was, Legion USA had been using US Green Mountain chrome line barrels. Wasn't real keen on that, so I got them to do a run with FB Radom barrels out of Poland. These were chrome lined, cold hammer forged, and exactly the same spec dimensions as Russian, and just known to be high quality barrels. So outside of being a legitimate Russian barrel, pretty darn good. You could also use those Romanian barrels that came in. And very similar thing for the receiver. This is a Childers receiver. I always like these because they came over already bent from Poland, built on original Soviet tooling. So you have the right shape to the dimples. You have the XY stamping. No scope rail, because that wasn't a standard for the AKM. Standard later. Looking on this side, simple here. And they even have Russian style selector markings with 3 positions, although of course the third is purely cosmetic. So really hard to do better. And we try to keep all the parts Russian. The receiver does count as US. Trigger group's actually Molot, one of their semi-auto groups from the kit. And they even ship these with a Russian sling, Russian cleaning kit, and a Russian bayonet. Now there are a few things. The main one, the finish isn't really correct. To be 100% clone correct, you want to have that Russian paint. It does have a paint finish, but it's just kind of more of a Duracoat type. But of course, finishes can be taken off and redone. But the Russian parts are all in excellent shape. The barrel's new condition, full featured with bayonet lug, of course, threaded. And while you might be able to do a better build, including even with the original Russian barrel, even when I did these, those were $3,000 guns. Today, even more. when these were produced, retail on them was like $1,300-1,500. Not cheap, but I felt like the value for money was very good. Again, you get a good barrel, good receiver, Russian parts, and you get a bayonet and sling too. And at a price that doesn't totally break the bank. It seemed fair to me. And that's the thing about clones. They're fun. But I think, and this is just my opinion, sometimes people lose sight. They start spending hundreds of dollars just for an extra marking, or $1,000 just for the exact right barrel. You can start chasing that dragon to the point of diminishing returns. And if you want to do that or have the disposable income, that's great. But I try to balance what I want with good economics. And this was as really good as I could do a true Russian AKM. It's got all the features. The thing is, if you try to convert a Sega, you're left with kind of a AK-100 series AKM hybrid. And the Arsenal guns, well, they have their own issues, especially if you try to convert like an SLR 107R. That's not going to turn into an AKM. But sometimes you just have to go with the kit build. And I've done other kit builds, Polish, East German, but I'd say this one's the one I'm most proud of. And the rivet works just very well done on this. Right markings. And I would say it's my best clone in the old collection. What do you think? Do you agree? It certainly makes me happy, and that's kind of the whole point of this list and me hanging out with you today to talk. Last mag with the SAR-1 at dark, no flash hider. Wolverine. And I do appreciate you hanging out. Hope everyone goes into having a good weekend. Like I said, taking a little rest, getting some catalog built up, trying to check with some SHOT Show stuff, and doing some more videos for the old personal channel, Misha. And like I said at the beginning, Patreon support is greatly appreciated, and $1 and up, you can ask questions in the Q&A, and that will probably be the one video we will definitely get to sooner than later. Will be the next Q&A for the beginning of 2022. So, if you'd like to get a question in post-SHOT Show, I figured that'd be a good time to... I was going to do it right before SHOT Show, beginning of January, and I thought, well, there's going to be a lot to talk about after, we hope. Let's push the Q&A back towards the end of January so we can chat about that. So if you'd like to talk about SHOT Show events, guns, thoughts, whatever, submit a question in the Q&A thread, and we'll close her out and get to answering them and do that. And again, you know how these vacations go. They usually don't last as long as we think, but sometimes I think it's just a mental rest. Know what I mean? And hopefully we'll be getting some nice spring weather soon. So with that, I'd greatly appreciate it. If you could, please like, share, subscribe. If you'd like, go over and check out the link to the Patreon page. With that, I'm going to go have a restful weekend, I hope. And I will catch you very soon, next time. This is Misha, again saying thank you very much.